Hey guys, John here. Okay, now what you guys are about to see are some horror story videos. No, not videos, horror stories. Stories that I've wrote and have been animated by Llama Arts and SSG Animation. And before you ask, yes, I really did write these stories. Now, the first things you guys are going to see are two tender horror story videos, two tender horror story videos, one tender horror story that was animated by Llama Arts, and another one that was animated by SSG Animation. After that, it will be followed by a true kidnapping horror story video. And yes, these videos do contain stories that I wrote myself. So before you ask, yes, I really did write these stories. So at the end, there's going to be a question at the end saying which tender horror story was better and which story was better overall. So, coming up are going to be two tender horror stories, one animated by Llama Arts and the other animated by SSG Animation, followed by the true kidnapping horror story. All stories written by me. Oh, and don't worry, YouTube. SSG Animation gave me his full consent to use these videos. So, yeah, a very special thanks to SSG Animation for letting me use his videos. He really did. I have the email to prove it. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much and please enjoy the videos. Now, cue intro.
My track record so clean, they couldn't wait to just bash me. I must be getting too flashy. Y'all shouldn't have let the world gas me.
This happened when I was 17 years old. It's been nearly 2 years since my girlfriend broke up with me, and I was very chewed up about it on the inside. I've called her several times, but it always went to voicemail. I've tried texting her on Messenger since, ironically, we were friends on Facebook, but still, not a single response. As the weeks went by, I became very devastated and was worried that I'd never find love again. My brother told me to just forget about my ex-girlfriend and that it was time for me to move on. He introduced me to this app called Tinder, which he said was great for online dating. I was very familiar with online dating, but never actually done any of it because there was no way that I even felt like hooking up with some random person I met online. But I figured it couldn't hurt to try it out, so I decided to give it a shot. After I finished setting up my account and was done creating my profile, I just started randomly liking a few of the girls that I thought were pretty. I'm not picky, I just wanted to make sure that I found the right girl for me. A few weeks later, I've had already received my first match on Tinder. Her name was Robin. She had blue hair, freckles, and beautiful amethyst purple lips. According to her profile, she had the same interest in the stuff I was into, and was even around the same age as me. Even better, she lived in the same town as me. By the way, I live in Memphis, Tennessee. We started having a friendly group chat on Tinder, which was going well. Her message said, "You may not know me, but we went to the same high school." I replied, "Are you sure?" She said, "Yeah, I was always the quiet one at the back of class. Anyways, I think you're really cute. We should hang out sometime." I agreed and asked her to where she wanted to hang out, where to meet her, and what time I should be there. She said we'd hang out at her place and meet her at the park tomorrow night at around 9 p.m. I accepted. I got to the park that night at around 9 p.m. sharp. I didn't call her because I didn't want to sound too desperate. Some time passed and I finally decided to call her to no response. I also tried texting her to no avail as well. It was around 9:30 p.m. There was still no sign of her and I was beginning to grow impatient. I was starting to think that maybe she wasn't going to show up at all. I sighed and said, "I knew this was too good to be true. She's not even here yet. Screw it. I'm going home. I can't believe I came out here this late for nothing." Oh well, so much for online dating. I was about to start my walk home when suddenly I saw a black convertible pull up to my location. The car stopped right in front of me, and the window rolled down, revealing a creepy-looking old man who was probably in his mid-30s. He gazed at me with a weird smile and asked, "You going somewhere, kid?" I responded, "Yeah, I'm just headed home." He asked me why I was out there this late, and told him that I was supposed to meet someone, but it seemed like she wasn't going to show up. He said, "Oh, you must be waiting for my daughter." The man, by the name of Jeff, introduced himself to me as Robin's father, and said that Robin has told him a lot about me. He told me that Robin couldn't meet me at the park because she remembered that was the night she had to go to a slumber party with her friends, and she forgot to cancel. He told me she wouldn't be home till 11 o'clock, and that's when I knew my night was a bust. He apologized and offered to give me a ride home. I knew it was going to take too long for me to walk, so I accepted. It was going to be a long drive, but luckily I knew all the shortcuts to my house. I told him where I lived and how to get there as I got into the car. After a few minutes, I was feeling tired from being out so late, so I closed my eyes for just a few short seconds and dozed off. Not long afterward, I awoke. Feeling a little drowsy, I rubbed my eyes and realized that I was still in the car. I asked the man where we were, as this wasn't the usual route to my house. He said, "Relax, kid, this is a shortcut. We're almost there." I asked where we were going, and then he looked at me with some sinister grin on his face and just chuckled. I felt my heart almost explode out of my chest as he did that. I looked down and saw a handgun sticking out of his jacket pocket. I put two and two together and realized what was happening. I told him, "Let me out now!" He responded, "No." Then, he put his foot on the accelerator, speeding up the car. I tried to get out, but he had already put the child lock on. It seemed hopeless. I was trapped. There was no way out. To make matters worse, we were driving through a forest area with no cell service. I couldn't even call for help. But I just had to get out. As soon as the car started to slow down, I stabbed him in his shoulder with a pocket knife that I found on the floor. He screamed in pain as I was able to turn off the child lock, unlock the door, and run as fast as I could into the woods. While I was running, I could hear multiple gunshots being fired at me, but luckily not a single one hit me. I never looked back because I had the fear of the man chasing me at the back of my mind. I dove behind a tree and hid under a bush. I heard the man yelling, "You can't hide from me! I will find you!" I covered my mouth with my hands and held my breath, trying not to make a sound. Everything was silent for a while, until I saw the man was looking for me with a flashlight. He flashed it past me multiple times. When I heard his footsteps going deeper into the woods, that's when I knew the coast was clear. I ran, using the flashlight on my phone to help navigate me through the dark and scary woods. In hindsight, I knew that was a stupid move considering the situation. I could hear the leaves crunching and the twigs snapping as I ran, which would also easily give away my position. When the crunching and snapping got louder, I looked behind me and my heart dropped when I saw that the man was chasing me. I ran as fast as I could with the man hot on my tail, firing every single last live round he had in his gun, but thankfully the shots missed again. "There's nowhere for you to hide," he said. I thought I was going to die, until I heard the man trip over something, and I was able to get away unharmed. I kept running until I was out of the woods and back onto the road. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be seen, which means I lost him. I sighed in relief, and then I saw a red car driving down the road. I was able to wave it down and told the driver that I was kidnapped and almost killed by some crazy man in the woods. It took a lot of begging, but the driver finally gave me a ride to the police station, and I told the cops everything. Unfortunately, I didn't get the man's tag number, but I gave the police a clear description. After the police had run a search, they told me that he didn't even have a daughter and that they've been trying to catch this guy for months. As it turns out, he's wanted in several countries for the kidnappings of multiple teenagers and young men. How I managed to escape him is a miracle. The officers kindly gave me a ride home, and I didn't tell anyone what happened except my brother. The man was never found, nor was he ever caught, and they say he's still out there, even to this day, which scares me the most. What's even worse is that I stupidly gave him my address, so who knows if he might try to kidnap me again. Needless to say, my days of using Tinder weren't over after that. The whole incident just made me a lot more cautious from there on out.
This happened when I was 17 years old. It's been nearly 2 years now since my girlfriend broke up with me, and I was very chewed up about it on the inside. I've called her several times, but it always went to voicemail. I've tried texting her on Messenger since, ironically, we were friends on Facebook, but still, not a single response. As the weeks went by, I became very devastated and was worried that I'd never find love again. My brother told me to just forget about my ex-girlfriend and that it was time for me to move on. He introduced me to this app called Tinder, which he said was great for online dating. I was very familiar with online dating, but never actually done any of it because there was no way that I even felt like hooking up with some random person I met online. But I figured it couldn't hurt to try it out, so I've decided to give it a shot. After I was finished setting up my account and was done creating my profile, I just started randomly liking a few of the girls that I thought were pretty. I'm not picky. I just wanted to make sure that I found the right girl for me. A few weeks later, I have already received my first match on Tinder. Her name was Robin. She had blue hair, freckles, and beautiful amethyst purple lips. According to her profile, she had the same interest in the stuff I was into and was even around the same age as me. Even better, she lived in the same town as me. By the way, I live in Memphis, Tennessee. We started having friendly group chat on Tinder, which was going well. Her message said, "You may not know me, but we went to the same high school." I replied, "Are you sure?" She said, "Yeah, I was always the quiet one at the back of the class. Anyways, I think you're really cute. We should hang out sometime." I agreed and asked her where she wanted to hang out, where to meet her, and what time should I be there. She said we'd hang out at her place and to meet her at the park tomorrow night at around 9 p.m., to which I accepted. I got to the park that night around 9 p.m. sharp. Some time passed and I finally decided to call her to no response. I also tried texting her to no avail as well. It was around 9:30 p.m. There was still no sign of her and I was beginning to grow impatient. I was starting to think that maybe she wasn't going to show up at all. I sighed and said, "I knew this was too good to be true. She's not even here yet. Screw it. I'm going home. Can't believe I came out here this late for nothing. Oh well, so much for online dating." I was about to start my walk home when suddenly I saw a black convertible pull up to my location. The car stopped right in front of me and the window rolled down, revealing a creepy-looking old man who was probably in his mid-50s. He looked dirty and smelled like he hadn't showered in weeks. He gazed at me with a weird smile and asked, "You going somewhere, kid?" I responded, "Yeah, I'm just heading home." He asked me why I was out there this late, and I told him that I was supposed to meet someone, but it seemed like she wasn't going to show up. He said, "Oh, you must have been waiting for my daughter." The man by the name of Jeff introduced himself to me as Robin's father and said that Robin has told him a lot about me. He told me that Robin couldn't meet me at the park because she remembered that was the night she had to go to a party with her friends and she forgot to cancel. He told me she wouldn't be home till 11 o'clock, and that's when I knew my night was a bust. He apologized and offered to give me a ride home. Well, I knew it was going to take too long for me to walk, so I accepted. It was going to be a long drive, but luckily, I knew all the shortcuts to my house. I told him where I lived and how to get there as I got into the car. After a few minutes, I was feeling tired from being out so late, so I closed my eyes for just a few short seconds and dozed off. Not long afterward, I awoke. Feeling a little drowsy, I rubbed my eyes and realized that I was still in the car. I asked the man where we were, as this wasn't the usual route to my house. He said, "Relax, kid. This is a shortcut. We're almost there." I asked where we were going, and then he looked at me with some sinister grin on his face. I felt my heart almost explode out of my chest as he did that. I looked down and saw a handgun sticking out of his jacket pocket. I put two and two together and realized what was happening. I told him, "Let me out now!" He responded, "No." Then he put his foot on the accelerator, speeding up the car. I tried to get out, but he had already put the child lock on. It seemed hopeless. I was trapped. There was no way out. To make matters worse, we were driving through a forest area with no cell service. I couldn't even call for help, but I just had to get out. As soon as the car started to slow down, I stabbed him in the shoulder with a pocket knife that I found on the floor. He screamed in pain as I was able to turn off the child lock, unlock the door, and run as fast as I could into the woods. While I was running, I could hear multiple gunshots being fired at me, but luckily, not a single one hit me. I never looked back because I had the fear of the man chasing me at the back of my mind. I dove behind a tree and hid under a bush. I heard the man yelling, "You can't hide from me! I will find you!" I covered my mouth with my hands and held my breath, trying not to make a sound. Everything was silent for a while until I saw that the man was looking for me with a flashlight. He flashed it past me multiple times. When I heard his footsteps going deeper into the woods, that's when I knew the coast was clear. I ran using the flashlight on my phone to help navigate me through the dark and scary woods. In hindsight, I knew that was a stupid move considering the situation. I could hear the leaves crunching and the twigs snapping as I ran, which would also easily give away my position. When the crunching and snapping got louder, I looked behind me and my heart dropped when I saw that the man was chasing me. I ran as fast as I could with the man hot on my tail, firing every single last round he had in his gun, but thankfully, the shot ceased again. "There's nowhere for you to hide," he said. I thought I was going to die until I heard the man trip over something and I was able to get away unharmed. I kept running until I was out of the woods and back onto the road. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be seen, which means I lost him. I sighed in relief, and then I saw a red car driving down the road. I was able to wave it down and tell the driver that I was kidnapped and almost killed by some crazy man in the woods. It took a lot of begging, but the driver finally gave me a ride to the police station, and I told the cops everything. Unfortunately, I didn't get the man's tag number, but I was able to give the police a clear description. After the police had run a search, they told me that he didn't even have a daughter and that they've been trying to catch this guy for months. As it turns out, he's wanted in several counties for the kidnappings, rapes, and murders of multiple teenagers and young men. How I managed to escape him is a miracle. The officers kindly gave me a ride home, and I didn't tell anyone what happened except my brother. The man was never found, nor was he ever caught, and they say he's still out there even to this day, which scares me the most. What's even worse is that I stupidly gave him my address, so who knows if he might try to kidnap me again. Needless to say, my days of using Tinder weren't over after that. The whole incident just made me a lot more cautious from there on out.
People say that life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Some people are confused by this phrase, while others know the definite meaning of it. What this phrase means is that life is unpredictable. Of course, at a young age, I found out the hard way that this world can also be full of cruel, heartless, evil, sick, and very sadistic people. But it's through this horrific childhood experience that I become famously known for who I am today, a survivor of a horrendous kidnapping. My name is Julie. I'm 26 years old, and this is my story. It happened when I was 10 years old. I was walking to school by myself for the very first time when I noticed a man in his mid-30s standing by a white delivery van. He seemed like an extremely nice and very talkative person, but as you know what they say, looks can be deceiving. The man approached me with a weird, sinister-looking grin on his face and said,
Good morning, kid. How are you today?
I replied to him, I'm fine.
That's good. What's your name, kid?
Julie?
Well, Julie, my name is Sebastian. Everyone calls me Bach, but you can call me Mr. B.
Okay, Mr. B.
Where are you headed off to, Julie?
I'm going to school.
Really? All by yourself? Where are your parents?
They're at home, getting ready to go to work. This is my first time walking to school by myself. The same sinister grin dawned on the man's face once more, and he said,
Say, Julie, want me to take you to school?
What?
Get in my van, Julie. I can drop you off at school. I have tons of snacks back there, too. Cakes, candies, cookies, and ice cream.
This immediately got me super freaked out. I may have been 10 years old, but I had more than enough sense to not get into some random stranger's car. A little terrified, I said, No thanks, Mr. B. I can just walk. Mr. B's face turned into a combined look of annoyance and anger. He then said,
All right. See you around then, you little shit.
He then started the van and drove away. I sighed in relief and then thought to myself, well, that was rude. I then brushed off the encounter and proceeded to walk to school. I don't know why, but I had the strangest feeling that it wasn't the last time I was going to see that creep. So, the entire walk to school, I kept looking behind me just to make sure he wasn't following me in his van. Just when I was halfway towards the school, I heard rapid footsteps approaching me, and then suddenly, I felt someone's arm around my waist, and their hand covered my mouth, and then I was lifted off the ground. The person then proceeded to carry me towards the mysterious white delivery van. I recognized this van. I immediately knew that I was being abducted by Mr. B. I began kicking and screaming while this crazy man forcefully kept trying to drag me into his van. I tried to scream as loudly as I possibly could, but his hand was covering my mouth, and he was gripping me so tightly that only little whimpers came out. I then started to bite his hand as hard as I possibly could. He screamed in pain and finally released me. I tried to make a run for it, but before I could, he grabbed me by my arm, and then I felt something cold and sharp sticking me in my neck. Next thing I knew, I was tossed into the van, and then suddenly, everything went black. Moments later, I awoke and found myself tied and taped, and my head was throbbing. I then heard a door opening and footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Mr. B.
Oh, good. You're finally awake.
He said. He had the same sinister grin on his face and a terrifying, hungry look in his eye. Judging from the background, I wasn't in a basement. I was inside a cellar. I realized that this crazy, sick bastard drugged me when he abducted me and then tied me up and brought me here while I was unconscious. He took the tape off my mouth, and with tears in my eyes, I cried and screamed, Please, let me go! I want to go home! I want my mommy and daddy! He slapped me in the face and yelled,
Shut up, you little bitch!
His slap really hurt. This man was crazy. I sobbed louder, and he slapped me again and said,
I said shut up!
This guy was insane. Then he got closer to my face and said,
Your parents can't help you, little piglet. You belong to me now, you little shit. And if you know what's good for you, you will do what I say when I say it.
I then said to him in a tearful voice, You're crazy. Mr. B then laughed manically and said,
Crazy am I? Listen, kid, here's a little something you need to know about life. We're all crazy in our own unique way, but it's how we handle our craziness that makes us different. And believe me, kid, you haven't seen crazy. Not just yet.
He then threatens me and said in a creepy, whispering voice,
If you ever try to escape or tell anyone, including the police, then I will kill you and bury you in the deepest hole I can find. And then I'll go after the rest of your family. You got that, kid?
With a tearful face, I nodded my head up and down in response. He then smiled, kissed me on my forehead, and said,
Sleep tight.
He then walked out of the room, turned off the lights, and went back upstairs. I spent the entire night in that cold, dark cellar, all tied up, and as soon as he left, I began to cry myself to sleep. I was miserable, but little did I know that was only the beginning of my troubles, and that my nightmare was just beginning. The days that followed afterwards were hectic. Every single night, when he thought I was being bad, he would torture me, beat me, starve me, and even worse, he would come down into the cellar and he would rape me. And yes, he did all those things every night, and that was only during the first week. It still brings me to tears when I recall all those things to this day. And eventually, those days turned into weeks, and those weeks turned into months, and those months finally turned into years. I'm not going to lie. During my childhood, and most of every single day and every single moment I spent living with that crazy man, can only be described in 2 words: pure hell. I was incredibly miserable during my childhood, and not a single day went by when I wasn't thinking about my parents and how they were feeling. Sometimes I even wondered if they were even looking for me. And every time I asked, pleaded, and begged Sebastian to take me back to my parents, he would get furious and start beating me on the spot. It was absolute torture. Sebastian always told me that he was the only parent I would ever need, and that his house and the cellar was the only home I was ever going to get. And of course, I was super devastated about it. Of course, by the time I was older, things actually got a bit better. Sebastian would even allow me to spend more free time outside the cellar, and he even had me do some work around his house to start earning my keep. And from the moment I was in my teens, he would often take me out at times, passing me off as his daughter. And there were several occasions where he would molest me, but not as much as he did when I was a child. Of course, every night, I would still have to sleep in the cellar. But of course, I didn't mind it very much, as I pretty much got used to it at that point. He would have me do chores around his house as a housekeeper, clean his car, and he would even allow me to go outside to work as a gardener. It took me years to gain his trust, but he allowed me more freedom outside the cellar. Of course, I was still thinking about my parents and my old home and my growing years, and my big chance to escape finally came when I turned 18. When I turned 18, he would take me out, passing me off as his wife, and would even make me do more work around the house, and and on one faithful day, I finally sought the chance to escape. It was Wednesday, and the day went as usual. I got up, made Sebastian breakfast, and we went and did our daily rounds. One afternoon, I was cleaning and vacuuming Sebastian's car in the garden when Sebastian got distracted by a phone call. Because of the vacuum's loud noise, he walked away to take the call. I left the vacuum cleaner running and ran away, unseen by Mr. B, who completed the phone call without any sign of being disturbed or distracted. I ran for quite some distance, through neighboring gardens and a street, jumping fences, and asking passersby to call the police, but they paid me no attention. After about 5 minutes, I knocked on the window of a 71-year-old neighbor, telling him who I was, and he called the police, who arrived shortly afterwards. Later that day, I was taken to the police station and was met with the best news of my entire life. Not only did my story check out, but as it turns out, I was identified as the missing girl who's been missing since she was 10. And even better, my parents were looking for me. I also came to know that I've been missing for 8 years, and my parents never stopped looking for me. I was thrilled hearing this news, and later that evening, I was finally returned home to my parents. My mom and dad rushed to hug me, and we were all in tears. The story doesn't end right there. I explained everything to my parents and to the police, and I even told them about Sebastian and what he did to me when I was 10 years old. I did end up getting justice, but however, it wasn't the justice I was expecting. The next day, I was informed by the police that they found Sebastian, but he wasn't alive. Apparently, when Sebastian saw that I escaped, he knew that the police were coming for him, and he committed suicide by running in front of a moving train. I guess he would rather end his own life like the coward he was, instead of facing what he's done. Call it Stockholm Syndrome or whatever you want, but I honestly can't say that I don't miss Sebastian, or rather that up until his death, that I kind of felt sorry for him. Sebastian's family mourned his death, and I attended his funeral secretly. He may have been a psychotic bastard, but Sebastian was right about one thing. We're all sick in our own way, and it's how we handle our sickness that makes us different. I now wish Mr. B to rest in peace. On the other hand, several years after I returned home, my story became widely known. There were several news segments about me. I've appeared on various talk shows, had a talk show of my own, and I even became an author, writing a book about my life and about my time in captivity. I'm also currently working on a movie about my time in captivity, and I'm often called at survivor events to tell my story. And thanks to my endurance and bravery, I am still around to be telling my story for more years to come. This was written by John Johnson Jr., aka Dragon Ball Universe. This story was based on the kidnapping of Natasha Kampusch. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to SSG Animation for more videos.